Welcome to InDepth. Well, will the 2010 budget help New Zealand get out of debt or just aid in maintaining our present financial status? We'll be looking at that later in the show. But up first, do New Zealanders still desire traditional values? And if so, what's being done to preserve these standards? The facts are: from Family First New Zealand survey March in 2010, 80% of parents want to be notified when their daughter is pregnant and considering an abortion. 69% of parents of young children want the abstinence message in sex education. 2/3 of New Zealanders are concerned about broadcasting standards for family viewing. Joining us now to discuss this is Bob McCoskrie, National Director for Family First, and Hamilton West MP Tim McIndoe. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, Janine. Good morning, Janine. Hi, Bob.
We'll start with you, Bob. New Zealanders, do they still desire traditional values, conservative values?
Oh, I think they do. I mean, I guess it's how you define it, but I think people are still concerned about the effect that the culture is having on families, the pressure on parents and the effect on kids. And in terms of our survey, we asked some questions about areas that we were concerned about, and we found there was still conservative views in terms of sex education, wanting kids to be told to wait until they can handle the consequences of pregnancy, concerned about broadcasting standards, the level of violence, sex and foul language, concerned about parental notification, parents being informed when their teenage daughter was considering an abortion. They're concerned about residential brothels opening opposite schools and next to kindies. So yeah, I think there is a view out there, but we need to make that view louder and stronger and be heard.
Things have changed a lot over the last few years, Tim. You know, now we have different kinds of marriages, so the family structure has changed. What is being done, do you think, to preserve the standards that obviously a good percent of New Zealanders want?
Well, you're right. I think that the vast majority of families do want that, but you're also right in saying that society has changed a lot, and there's so much social breakdown, so many dysfunctional families now that it's very difficult to get a consistent line, even within communities, as to what can be done. Perhaps later in the program we'll be touching a little bit on the alcohol report that has come out this week. I think that we need to tackle a number of the issues that are there, because there's no doubt that abuse of alcohol is having a huge negative impact on a whole lot of our values and a whole lot of our social behaviour, particularly among young people. Another thing that I'm personally very keen on, and have been for a long time as a political candidate, is trying to encourage schools to teach what you might call cornerstone values. A number of schools have picked that up, and they do it very effectively. When I go on school visits, I'm very impressed by what a large number are doing. But of course, the school can only do so much. We have to ensure that things are happening in the home as well. And it's very difficult to legislate for that, but we can certainly encourage it and try to ensure that options such as values education, for instance, are made more widely available.
Do you think that New Zealand is a morally declining country?
No, that might be the perception, but based on this polling it would suggest that no, there's huge concerns about some of these social issues. I would argue that for 9 years we've had some fairly major social engineering that went on. People, I think, National benefited in the vote in the last election because people wanted to end that. The worry I have is that National has come in and said we won't do social engineering, but they won't fix it either. And you know, I'm pleading with them to fix the prostitution laws, because at the moment a brothel could open next door to your family home, with all the traffic and all the clientele that involves, and the, you know, neighbours throughout the country have said to us, you know, where they've had a brothel move next door, it's terrible to have that type of activity going on in the next door house. We've got them near kindies and schools. So there's some stuff that needs to be fixed. We need to promote marriage.
At the moment, that's actually local government legislation, isn't it?
Well, no, the local governments have been tied because the law that was passed on to local governments wasn't strong enough to give local councils the authority to do what ratepayers want them to do, which is restrict access. Hamilton has appealed, spent a lot of money on legal bills, and have a good bylaw in place. I wish every area would have the same one as Hamilton. But others like Auckland have been challenged, and so they're scared to touch it. Waitakere City Council are scared to introduce a bylaw because they know they're going to end up in court. So it's got to go back to the lawmakers. They've got to fix the law.
What's your personal opinion on this, Tim?
Well, I was personally very strongly opposed to the Prostitution Law Reform Bill when it went through Parliament. I was amazed that the Parliament of the day did pass it. As a parent of teenage daughters, or they were younger at that stage, I thought, I do not want to have anything that sends a message to them that prostitution is a legitimate career option. It's not. It's absolutely abhorrent, and I agree with Bob to the point that we want to be doing everything we can to try to discourage prostitution from becoming readily accessible, particularly in residential areas.
Talking about broadcasting standards, you brought that up before. What's the biggest concern around that?
The Broadcasting Standards Authority, the Advertising Standards Authority and the Censorship Board. I'd sack the three of them because they argue that they are reflecting standards in society. They're simply reflecting what people want. No, I argue that they're setting the standard. As they drop the standards, as they allow sexual content, as they allow violent content, as they allow foul language, it normalises it. And to the point where, I mean, we did an examination of programs before 8:30, which is supposed to be the family viewing time between 6 and 8:30. We found a saturation of sexual innuendo, foul language, not so much the violence, that tends to kick in later on, but you know, advertising, the billboards that we're seeing around, the types of ads. We're saying we need to tighten up these regulations, and obviously we have the concern of New Zealanders. That was a strong response.
It was a strong response. There is a concern here to me, though, that, you know, particularly when it comes to television, there are ads all the time saying that you can complain, but I imagine people don't do it.
Well, one, they don't know how to do it sometimes. Two, they think, is it worth it? And look, I share that concern. I wonder whether it's worth it simply because of the decisions that have been passed down. And three, it takes up 1 to 2 months for it to happen, and by that time the advertisers got their money's worth and they've already moved on to the next activity. So one thing that we'd like to change immediately is a pre-vetting system, and we've run that past the Minister of Broadcasting. But this poll response simply suggests that it's not just us and it's not just prudes who are concerned, it's actually mainstream New Zealand.
Okay, sorry,
So
Tom,
I
you
was
were
just
going
going
to
to
say...
say, Janine, I agree with that. It isn't just prudes, and there is, I think, quite a significant shift back to what I would consider pretty mainstream values. We had a good example in Hamilton just recently where a protest outside a shop that had offensive advertising actually resulted quite quickly in the advertising being taken down. The difficulty we quite often see is that when there is some publicity given to objections within a community, it actually helps to advertise the thing that is causing the offence. And while I can see Bob's point about the concerns over some of the Advertising Standards Authority and the Broadcasting Standards Authority, I still would encourage people to object because those are the correct channels to go down. The downside of it is, and we saw, for instance, an appalling campaign by a company a few years ago which resulted in condoms being put in letterboxes to promote a product.
That's right.
That was absolutely outrageous. It resulted in a huge number of complaints, quite rightly. But of course that also helped to advertise the product, and that's just a difficulty that is very difficult to overcome.
I really think we need to somehow encourage all New Zealanders really just to do more about what they think, because we leave it to, you know, organisations like Family First and the politicians to fix everything, and that's never going to be enough, is it?
Well, no, it's probably never going to be enough. We do have a censor. I think Bob is right. We have to ensure that these agencies and people who are employees of the state actually enforce the legislation and the regulations that they're given to deal with. I personally have felt for a long time that much of the material coming in from overseas that is broadcast is offensive, and I think we're seeing that in a lot of the behaviour, the attitudes and the language that is in our communities.
Some of the local stuff is offensive as well.
Not
Not this program, of course.
That's true. That's true. And of course a lot of it comes out from the politicians as well, so I don't want to sound holier than thou.
Yes, Parliament broadcasting, yeah.
Hey, let's just move on to another issue, really, where parents lose the opportunity to parent in a lot of ways. Since 2004, teenage girls have had the opportunity to have abortions without the notification of their parents, without letting their parents know, and also now, of course, the Gardasil vaccine, they're able to have it at school. Parents would never know unless children decide to talk about it. And we're talking about young teenage girls here.
Well, it's actually since about 1979, 1980 that the laws existed. 2004 they revisited it. Judith Collins tried to get an amendment so that parents would be informed if a teenager was pregnant and wanted to have an abortion. At the moment they can be sneaked off by the school nurse or by family planning without the parents giving permission. So I have to write a note before my daughter can go on camp or can go on a school trip to the zoo, and if I don't sign that note, my daughter doesn't go. But if she gets pregnant and wants an abortion, they can sneak her off without even my knowledge or permission. That was never the intention of the original law. The law was that we should be informed. It may come back to the choice of the teenager, but the parents should still be involved in the process. And we know that some medical practices are writing directly to teenagers, asking them for the Gardasil vaccine and saying, if you want advice, not go to your parents, it's come to us. So we're saying that parents should be involved in this process.
It's serious,
it's an insult
isn't it?
to parents.
It's pretty serious. Now, Tim, we know that you don't agree with this, but what is the government doing about it to support parents to get that notification?
Well, I'm interested to hear Bob talking about the amendment that Judith Collins wanted to put through, because I completely agree that it is outrageous to cut parents out of this process. They have a right. I'd be happy to talk to Judith about that particular issue. Certainly the government does not encourage or promote that attitude to these things. What are we doing about it at the moment? I'm afraid I can't really answer that question. I mean, it's more sort of Bob's area than the topic I've come on for today. But certainly I would want to ensure that we do whatever we can to promote the rights of the parent to be fully involved in counselling the child. Some children get into terrible difficulty. To cut the parents out of their process at their time of greatest need and emotional challenge is, to my mind, totally unacceptable. And actually, I'm surprised that the research says it's only 80%. I would have thought it would have been higher.
The argument is that for some kids, if they admit to their parents they're pregnant, they will get figuratively killed. And look, the Judith Collins amendment said that if that was the case, you would apply to the family court for an exception. So it was a release valve, but the default was that parents would be told. What we've got in law now is the default is that, and kids know this, you don't have to tell your parents. You just go to the school nurse on Monday morning, and I tell you, there's a procession. I've been told by school nurses and guidance counsellors that there is a procession off to family planning for the abortion.
It's terrible. I just want to go to one last thing before we go to a break. Last night, the tobacco excise bill has gone through without the support of ACT. Why has ACT not supported this bill?
Well, one ACT MP did vote for it. There were 118 votes in favour and 4 votes against in the Parliament. So every party except for ACT was united on the issue. Their argument was essentially that they're a low-tax party, they don't favour tax increases, and clearly this is a significant increase in taxes over 3 stages. One was immediate, one at the beginning of next year and one at the beginning of the year after. Sir Roger Douglas also advanced the argument in the House that this was an attack on the poor. The large number of of relatively poor people smoke cigarettes, and this was just adding to the burden and would have an impact on family budgeting and all the rest of it. There may be some truth in that, but we felt it was much more important to send a really big deterrent signal to young people not to take up smoking, and to those people who are already smokers. We know that these things are price sensitive. Putting up the price will have an impact and reduce the number of people smoking, and that's got to be good for their health and for us as a society, and that's what the aim of the measure was.
Correct. Okay, well, we'll be back with both of you shortly. Okay, it's now time for our Community Watch. This is your opportunity to support the police in keeping our neighbourhoods safe. Tauranga Police are seeking information about a pedestrian that was knocked down by a car at 9:20 outside the Welcome Bay Community Hall on Friday the 23rd of April. The female driver of the dark-coloured saloon stopped to assist the pedestrian but left prior to police and ambulance attendants. Police are urging the driver or anyone with information to call Crime Stoppers 0800 555 111. After the break, we'll continue talking with Tim McIndoe and Bob McCoskrie, but we'll turn our focus to the budget. We'll see you shortly.